Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? Tell me I'm crazy.
Mulder, you're crazy.
I can't give up. Not as long as the truth is out there. I want to believe.
Welcome to this episode of the X-Files with your host Mark and Becky. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Right, so we're into season 3. Doesn't time fly? Doesn't time?
Hello. When you're having fun.
Yeah. So season 3. This is, I mean, the end of season 2 was the first part of a 3-part adventure. So this first episode and the second one, we could even probably just do them together. Maybe I'm not sure. One long story in effect. However, I think there's stuff going on that's so interesting. It's probably worth keeping them distinct. Now I've said it.
Science fiction.
This first one is called The Blessing Way, directed by R.W. Goodwin, who I think directed the last one of 2. I could be wrong. This one was written by Chris Carter. Its air date was 22nd of September 1995. First aired in America on that date. Right, so it continues on from... The last thing we saw was Mulder apparently being dead by being firebombed inside a buried train cart full of human alien hybrids. That's quite an ending that was. It starts, if I remember right, it starts with like a talk over from what's his name, Albert Holstein, about memory burns pure, whereas history is trying to damp that fire down. Which is kind of cool, kind of a cool speech. And we also see the cigarette smoking man goes and visits the Navajos, and they beat some of the young Navajos pretty badly. It's pretty horrible.
Yeah.
We also it appears that Scully is there and she thinks Mulder's dead, and she gets these soldiers kind of stop her and search her. And ask her about the files and stuff like this. But meanwhile, this one's a bit of a cop-out. Mulder kind of just gets found by the Indians in like a hole in the ground with his hand sticking out of it, and they kind of uncover him. They kind of avoid the whole practical, how did he escape from this? It didn't bother me, this. Did it bother you that he just kind of happened to find some sort of a hidey hole somewhere?
It did a little bit, but I'm not sure if it was in this episode or the one before when we get a glimpse of the aliens in the boxcar, and they seem to find a little hatch that they're all trying to crawl out of, and I just assumed that he'd found that as well.
Okay. I hadn't noticed that bit. Okay. Well, obviously he's found some sort of hatch or way out of a boxcar, and the troops hadn't noticed it. So I assume it must have been through the aliens. They would have seen anything else. But anyway, they find him. He's not in a good way. And there's some cool stuff where he has to kind of do a ceremony with him, don't they? And stuff like that. Kind of cool. It reminded me a bit of... have you watched season 10?
No.
Okay, well, there's a drug trip Mulder goes on in season
I've heard
10.
a lot about it.
Which is amazing. It's got a fantastic song by, I think, Tom Waits in it. Something like "Misery is the River of the World." It's like, I couldn't believe it when I did it. It was just absolutely amazing. It's funny because one of the other ones we discuss, and I'll get to it when we get to it. But one of the other ones we discuss in these four also very, very strongly came to mind when I was watching season 10. So anyway, that's by the way. But he gets to talk to Deep Throat and his dad again, doesn't he?
He does, in a scene that was very kind of reminiscent of Scully's conversation with her father in, was it One Breath?
One Breath, yes, definitely. It was quite reminiscent of that. And it was kind of cool. There was one bit in this episode that I thought was very grim, which was we get a kind of a flash and an insight into the alien-human hybrids being deliberately gassed.
Yes, and that's the bit where I saw the hatch.
Okay, I missed that. Very, just made me think of, it reminded me most of a scene in Apt Pupil, where there's like a guy dreaming of a concentration camp.
Yeah.
And various other things with concentration camps. Usually, let's not go on about concentration camps, but it definitely reminded me of that. And later on, in either this, I think in the next episode, it's this episode. Nazis, I'll get confused. It's the next episode. Nazis get raised as well, which kind of what's going on here? So Mulder gets encouraged to carry on the fight by Deep Throat, and he also finds out from his dad that Samantha's not with them. Now, obviously, this is Mulder's own psyche telling him this. Certainly if you have a deterministic frame of mind, but something's telling him that Samantha's not with them. Scully gets her badge and gun taken away because of what's gone on. And Skinner, it's kind of interesting, this one. Skinner's definitely shady. You're never quite sure if he's on their side or what's going on during this one. She goes to try and retrieve their tape with the Navajo stuff from Mulder's desk, but it's disappeared. And there's a really quite sweet scene after that where she turns up at her mother's. And she's basically walked there and she's taken her shoes off because her feet are blistered. It felt a very genuine scene to me.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that one?
This is this just after she's discovered the kind of implant?
No, I don't think she's discovered it at this point. She's just been busted, basically.
Okay.
Because she goes back later about the.
She does, and she's having the conversation with the sister. But we really kind of get an insight into her character in this episode, much more in regards to her kind of familial relationships.
Yeah.
And it's obviously, Mulder's out of the picture, and it's very much kind of her episode. Yes, it is. Yes, Mulder's not much in this apart from his tribal stuff. In fact, David Duchovny did not like this episode because of that. He felt like Mulder had lots of well, it was kind of that. There's a touch of the Shatners about it when he told us about it, but it was kind of more like, well, I had all this important info and I wasn't included in the episode. It was like, but no, it was her episode indeed, and it worked fine. As far as I was concerned, it worked well on that content. There's a lot of Scully in this, both happy and sad. The next scene after the sadness with her mother is Frohickey turning up at the door, pissed. Yeah. His leather jacket. Drunk, with a pretty much empty bottle of whiskey, or was it? It was J&B, I think. And she goes, "Oh, come in," and he's really cut up. But he tells tells Scully the body of the Thinker's turned up, and it's that the Thinker's the hacker, super hacker. He helped them with when they were looking into what was up with Scully when she was in the hospital. I think the Thinker was the guy that sort of helped analyse the DNA
and stuff like that.
And that's a nice tie-in to the implant that she finds in this episode, I think.
She goes and this is where the implant stuff happens. She goes to see Skinner about the thinker, but he gives a reasonably valid explanation why he's not really that interested in it. But it feels like a distinct brush off. So again, we're getting kind of the suggestion he's not on their side really. That's the impression given here. And he basically says what we need is the tape. And later on, we see Skinner with the cigarette smoking man sort of arguing about stuff. Now, I think on the way in, she kind of set off the metal detector and thought, what's that? But also on the way out, I think she says to the guy, can you wave your wand, whatever it is. And they detect something in her shoulder. In the meantime, the cigarette smoking man's kind of reassuring his colleagues that it's all under control, but... now we see John Neville, the great actor John Neville's in this, and his character's most usually referred to as the well-manicured man. It's a good name. And I didn't recognise him at first. I thought, I know that guy. I know he's a really good actor, but I can't replace him. I had to look up John Neville. Most famous in my mind for being Baron Munchausen in the movie. But he's in lots of things, He's a good presence. And he doesn't like the cigarette smoking man. I definitely get that impression. Do you?
Yes.
he pretty much loathes him. And he raises, doubts about his effectiveness, about the Mulder being dead, the files being recovered. And I think at this point, cigarette smoking man he hasn't got the file at this point, but he assures them that I think he pretends he's still got it. He says, I've vouchsafed it, so I have to go. And you'll have to give me 24 hours and stuff like that. In the meantime, Scully's got this weird computer chip thing in her shoulder, which reminded me. I can't remember which episode it was. There was an episode they find like a computer chip thing, and she puts it under a barcode scanner, and it goes mad.
Was Dwayne Barry, isn't it?
Dwayne Barry, right? Okay, yes. Yeah. Now, so this is all tying up, isn't it? Yeah. Now, Melissa. She's talking to Melissa about this, and she goes, I need to get access. And no, Melissa says, you need to access what's going on. And she said, but I haven't got any resources. Scully thinks Melissa means, the computer chip, but she actually means her own memories. So she suggests hypnotherapy, which is like flaky old Melissa. Hey. But Scully agrees, doesn't she? Now I can't remember what happened in this scene. It didn't really stick with me. It was nowhere near. I remember quite vividly the one where she goes to see the therapist with the Donny Faster episode, and that was a really good scene. This one just doesn't stick with me. I can't remember what she was talking about. Can you remember?
Just kind of going back to the early kitchen scene, I thought that was really nice. Like I say, the familiar relationships, and you get that kind of. Not so much repression in Scully, but she doesn't feelings, emotions, instinct, all the stuff that kind of Mulder operates on. And he's very similar to Melissa in that way, I think.
Yeah.
Spiritualism. She is scientific. Like you said, the first thing she thinks of is, the scientific resources that she would have normally access to. So it's really interesting that she doesn't want to look, she doesn't want to, look at herself at all, and especially in terms of like psychotherapy, psychoanalysis. And it's the scene itself, nothing really happens because she's kind of blocking it all the way.
I kind of agree. Sorry, go on.
Just going to say with the I can't remember what the episode's called now. Irresistible, was it?
Irresistible, yes.
In that, she's, like I think you pointed out at the time, she's completely open and vulnerable, and we're really getting her true feelings. In this, she just doesn't want to. She's just not kind of playing ball at all, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah,
as you kind of point out, Melissa is kind of the analogue of Mulder. The proxy of Mulder, now that Mulder's absent, for Scully. And it's got me thinking along the lines of when you have a colleague that is a certain way, Mulder's a certain intuitive, so it kind of would. I would imagine it would tend to make your own tendencies that way atrophy somewhat, because you got someone else doing it for you, so you'd like hone up the complementary skills. I'm not sure I'm explaining myself for her, but I can kind of see why you'd shut those down, because you've got someone who's better at it there to sort of bounce things off with, you know what I mean? So it could be that the absence of Mulder here is confusing her somewhat. So it made me wonder why she was went along with Melissa so readily. Because most circumstances Scully would like go, if you suggested something like that. But anyway, she does agree. She then attends William Mulder's funeral, which confused me, because I thought they were doing Mulder's funeral at that point for a bit. And then it was like, oh, it was his. Okay. She actually, quite unusual for Scully, she actually said something that is more emotional than, rational. She actually tells Mulder's mother that she thinks Mulder's alive.
Yes, his poor mother, who's gone through hell with, his sister, his father being murdered, and now him being missing. She's not having a good time. I do feel a bit bad. She's a good actress. That she doesn't get much screen time, but she's pretty good as Mulder's mother. I think she's got. I think it helps that they look quite alike. So it feels real. Anyway, one manicured man's hanging around, and he hears like this dialogue between Scully and Mulder's mother, and he tells her how important the tape is, and people will die over this tape, and he advises her there's two ways she might be killed over it. One is a couple of assassins will be waiting in her home, or an apparent friend will invite her to somewhere secluded. So he basically tells her she's got two ways of dying. It basically is warning her to maybe be careful with the tape. I'm not quite sure what his motivations is here. I know he doesn't like the cigarette smoking man, but it's not clear why he tells her this, other than he wants her to keep operating, I guess. So she can avoid the trap. I love the kind of coldness of his character, and that he admits that the reason he is kind of stepping in is that he doesn't like the way that certain people are kind of behaving rashly within the syndicate, and that could cause it all to crumble, and him to kind of feel the consequences. So he's looking after himself, and he readily admits that, and he says they will come and kill you. So I don't know, maybe I don't know, it's a bit of a strange one at this point, but it's great to kind of see that cold, calculated kind of. It's kind of like a superhero villain-esque.
Yeah,
I think
it's got a touch of that. But it makes you glad that his interests align with keeping Scully alive, doesn't it? Really, because she wouldn't have known. It
feels a little bit like it's kind of just pushing the plot along.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, they're turning up at a few. I mean, having said that, he does know Bill Mulder, doesn't he? They're part of the syndicate. I was wondering if any other people from the syndicate were there and we just didn't notice them or anything. It'd be interesting to rewatch that bit, actually, because when I first watched it, I thought it was Mulder's funeral. Now I know it's Bill Mulder's. That might change. I'll have a closer look at the people in the crowd.
Yeah.
Now it turns out I'm trying to remember. It's kind of a bit convoluted here. There are. She's on her. Let me think. She's on her way home, and I think Melissa tells her, "I want to see you. I'll come to your house." And then she gets a call from Skinner to go to have a meeting with him. She knows it's a bit shady, so she immediately calls back Melissa, leaves an answer phone message to not bother coming over, or something like that. Doesn't it?
Yeah, I think she's on the phone in her apartment. She's in her apartment. Her sister calls her, and then straight afterwards she hears another click, so she knows somebody's been listening. And she tries to call her back because Melissa said she would come over to the apartment, and she leaves a message. And as she goes out to go to Melissa's, that's when Skinner pulls up. And instead of going to her sister's, which would have been the clever thing to do, they go to Mulder's apartment. to talk.
Yeah, that's it. It wasn't a click after the phone, was it? There was another phone call, and when she answers it, as they put the phone down, so she knows someone's trying to see if she's there. So she knows about this shady killing people thing. But I guess she's distracted by Skinner, but you'd think it'd be really important that she actually talk to her sister, say, do not come here. But anyway, it's a little minor quibble, really. Unfortunately, we get Krycek and another guy waiting in Scully's apartment. When Melissa shows up, Krycek shoots her, not thinking she's Scully, Dana Scully, but it turns out it's Melissa, which is a shame. Really, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Bye bye Melissa kind of thing.
Very
not
much
quite, but
mirrors Mulder's situation again. With his father.
Yeah,
you know,
loses a
they're
family
both.
member. Yes.
Yeah.
So they're both losing in this one quite significantly. Now Skinner and Scully meet, and basically we get a Mexican standoff, don't we? Skinner says he's got the tape, but there's a shadow under the door. So this one really makes you think that what is Skinner up to? You know, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What's going on? I kind of enjoyed this one. It was kind of fun. And again, a lot going on. It's good to see Krycek back, but it was kind of cool. I really enjoy it better once I've seen the third part, you know, the next episode. It kind of all puts it into relief. This felt like a respectable bridging episode between the first and last parts of the story to me.
Yes, but I must say that I think the tension was there. The standoff between Scully and Skinner in particular, when they're both really kind of, he's shouting at her and she really gives it back. I thought it was great, really great scene. She's
not backing down there.
No.
There was some nice moments in this, and I quite enjoyed it. But I think that. I could have done with more Mulder. I'm kind of with David Duchovny on this. Could have done with a little more Mulder. Him floating around in space was kind of cool, and a bed.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that his father and Deep Throat were saying was quite interesting and really kind of raised the stakes. You know, all of the answers that he would find, and he was, you know, so close, and he wouldn't believe, you know, just how deep the kind of rabbit hole goes. Kind of thing really sets up the third season and a lot more questions. Thought that was great. And like I say, I thought it was quite tense, and also because it was very much Scully's episode, that sense of paranoia was kind of prevalent throughout with the chip, because obviously we don't find out what that is at all, but it all kind of harkens back to the two-parter Dwayne Barry and Ascension. You know, from the piece, like you say, that was scanned then. So, and it links quite nicely into the next episode in regards to what they find. Okay,
well, let's get on to that next episode. What would you rate this one?
I think I would give this a 7.
Yeah, I'll give it a 7 too. I thought it was a pretty solid episode, but not... I'm starting to realise that I'm much more of a fan of the Monster of the Week episodes. I kind of like the Myth Arc stuff, but it's not top tier for me, mostly, with maybe exceptions like One Breath, or where something, you know, very emotional happens. Though having said that, there's a fair bit of emotion in this one, you know. Yeah,
and I think because there's 3 parts as well. I thought when we get to the episode after the next one, so the third episode of season 3, it was quite a welcome relief to have a Monster of the Week episode.
Yeah, it was. Okay, let's have a little musical interlude, and then we'll get on to the next episode.
Michael Rennie was ill the day the earth stood still, but he told us where we stand. And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Cloud Range was the invisible man. Then something went wrong for Faraday and King Kong. They got carried a cellular jam. Then at a deadly pace, it came from from outer space, and this is how the message ran. Science fiction, double feature.
Okay, so episode 2 of season 3, Paperclip, directed by Rob Bowman. We've seen a lot of Rob Bowman. Written by Chris Carter, aired a week after the last one, 29th of September 1995. So we start with the standoff. It does jump into that pretty quickly. There's also this portent about a white buffalo calf being born. It's a very positive a good omen for the Navajos. We get some of that, but then we get the standoff, and Mulder comes in, and Scully looks kind of shocked, but kind of happy. I couldn't quite read her emotions. She's obviously pleased to see him, but it's kind of Mulder. Skinner is kind of a bit surprised too, and basically he has to stand down, but he shows them the tape. And I mean, it's well established through this episode. Skinner's a good guy. He's on their side. We see that in the way he deals with them and the way he deals with the CSM. So it kind of settles that particular sort of bit of doubt. We see Mulder and Scully with two of the lone gunmen. What's his name? I've forgotten their names. Not Frohickey, the other two. Langley and whatever it is. Can't remember. They have got a picture of Mulder's dad with several men outside a big building, taken in the 50s or 60s or something. They identify one of them is a Nazi, Klemper, and they start talking about Operation Paperclip. I found this really interesting. What do you think?
Yes, indeed.
And then Frohickey turns up, and he's so pleased to see Mulder that he gives him a great big old bear hug. It seems to me Frohickey's closer to Mulder than the other two. Do you get that impression?
Yeah, I think we saw that in the previous episode when he turns up at Scully's apartment, and he seems to have nowhere else to go. He's come to her place, and seems to be their kind of connection with Mulder is much stronger. He's not gone to, the other members of the lone gunmen's houses. No,
that's right. And in a very, very nicely slipped in bit of plot contrivance to speed the story along, he mentions that he monitors the police radio signals, and he's heard that Molly's sister's in the hospital. So that's.
But you can imagine him doing that.
Yeah, you can actually. Yeah. Scully's mother's in the hospital, thinking it's Dana, but then she finds out it's Melissa, and we see Melissa wrapped up in bandages. All her head, apart from her eyes a bit, where she's still wearing full makeup. I noticed. Yep. I always notice stuff like that. Oh my god! And then we see a syndicate meeting where CSM says he's got the tape. Mulder's dead. From my notes, I think I got this conflated with the original meeting. Now, Will Manicure Man sort of says, I want to see the tape. I think he says, "Don't you believe me?" And I said, "No, we'd like to see it." So basically, the CSM's cigarette smoking ban standing's going down now, isn't it?
It really
They're
is.
not really thinking much of him, and he says, "I'll bring it tomorrow." Now, because of this photo of the old Nazi, Mulder's got to manage to go and see the old Nazi. So apparently, everyone knows where he lives. That's great. Well, actually, should we talk about Paperclip, the real Paperclip, for a bit? I don't know much about it. It's kind of shocking when you hear about, the fact that the Americans got all these Nazi scientists over because they wanted their research skills, so they basically let them off the hook.
Yes, and kind of then seeped into the kind of Cold War period as well.
Yeah. Now, I think there's some sort of a level of acceptability when you're talking about rocket scientists. But when you're talking about the Nazis that worked on biological experiments and stuff like that, I find that really hard work. And I do believe a lot of the biological scientists, if they weren't involved, their data was used in some of the sort of, the space exploration stuff about, body temperature and stuff like that. Well, I don't know. Is that fair enough? I don't know. It's a really grey area.
It really is.
If the data's there and you can use it to help people, is it morally wrong to use data that came from places like that? I don't know. Actually, that's a bigger question I can possibly ask. But this one implies they're actually working with the Nazi scientists working on biological experimentation, which is I don't know enough about Operation Paperclip to know it's true, but I could kind of believe it, frankly. Anyway, let's go. Let's avoid that dark area. So he's talking away to them, and he says, "You knew my father," and stuff like that. And in the end, he doesn't want to talk to anyone, but he asks him a curious question: "Do you know the formula of Napier's constant?" And then he tells them the picture was taken at I think Struckhold Mining Company in West Virginia. Yeah. Okay. So so that confused me because he said formula. Formula's like, X plus Y equals Z kind of thing, and that confused me. What he meant was the value of Napier's constant. It's just a bit of poor right in there, really. So basically, he said, he says, "Oh, this number and this place," he's kind of told them. So there's something going on there. But he rings the Well Manicured Man and tells them that Mulder's still alive. So Manicure Man's got kind of a bit of ammo against the cigarette smoking man.
More ammo.
Yeah, and I can't tell if he's pleased or not, frankly.
No.
It's hard to tell.
It's that supervillain exterior.
Yeah. Albert Holstein turns up at the hospital, Melissa's bedside, and asks Scully's mum if he can pray over Melissa. He also tells her Scully's okay. I feel kind of sorry for Scully's mum because Scully never turns up. She just keeps sending messengers. And first one being an old Indian fella who wants to pray. Yeah.
Especially when he comes in and, the doctor said that she's been improving. He's like, she's very weak. Paul Scully's mum's just like, oh.
His name confuses me. Albert Hostin does not sound like a Native American name. It sounds Jewish, frankly. Yeah. So it's anyway, that's fun. So they go to this massive building, mining corporation, and find a load of locked vaults, and they start trying to use Napier's constant, this number, I think it's about 6 or 7 digits, to get into the vaults. And some of them don't work, but one does. And when they go in, bloody hell, what do they find? Low filing cabinets, over filing, millions of records, possibly, isn't it? In fact, they use the phrase "lots of files," lots and lots of files. So they're like kind of looking around this. Oh yeah. And while this is going on, Cigarette Smoking Man meets up with Skinner, who tries to kind of start to broker a deal about a tape, and the CSM is really angry, isn't he? He's really crossing this one, really threatening. I think he says things like, you could die of a heart attack, man, your age, and stuff.
Which I think shows that his power is slipping a little bit.
Yeah. When you have to stop, really powerful people do not have to shout, and they don't have to threaten. They just have to, suggest. But here he's kind of really turn up to. We get the good old my personal favourite, the X-Files torches in this. I love them torches. I've got to get one. I'm going to get one for Christmas. And they start going through the records, and I think at first they realise it's all from the same year. It might have been in the area they're looking in. I think 1955. I don't think that's significant or anything. I don't know. But then they go find Scully's records. And she says they notice that they're like tissue samples in each of them, and Scully made another bit of great script shorthand here. She says, "Oh yeah, these are the old style ones they used to collect tissues with," which is like a throwaway line at that point. But then when they find Scully's, she says, "That's the new way. That's the new way to collect tissues." And there's some tissue sample with her records, so they've obviously collected her. Her tissue samples, and then Mulder goes and finds his sister's record with a fresh dish yourself. So we got in that one little scene, we get a lot of information there. They're collecting, Scully's part of the experiment. Mulder's sister must still be alive because they've got fresh tissue. And then finally, he peels away her name and finds his name under it, which suggests she was a substitute for him, deliberately to be taken. So loads of info in a quite impressively short scene. Quite impressed with that kind of pacing, and it works perfectly well, doesn't it? It doesn't feel rushed or anything.
No.
And then it goes completely mad. Mulder goes wandering off, sees a massive UFO land, and meanwhile Scully's wandering around. There's something moving in the shadows, and loads of little green men run past her. Which to me was, at first when I thought that, well, there you go, Scully. There you go. Try and explain that rationally. But unfortunately, we see it. We don't know if she saw it because she was kind of rushed.
Yeah.
So we don't know what she saw at that point.
There should be a parody of her just at a computer trying to explain all these things.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But she does see like a silhouette of one going through a door, doesn't she, with a bright light? Obviously, it's getting in the UFO. It's ET going home, basically. This UFO is bloody massive, though. It has to be said. Mulder's outside looking at the UFOs, as you do, and suddenly a big fleet of big black cars. They might as well bad guys written on the side of them pull up, and lots of nasty men jump out and start shooting at him, and he runs away. But he must have gone out of the vault because he runs back in and shuts the door behind him. And curiously, did you notice that they seem to have the code to get in?
Yes.
So they must have been well briefed. And they just carry on chasing him. But luckily, because Scully's seen this ET doorway, she knows the way out, so she shows them the way out. So that's kind of cool. It's great to have a big vault and you happen to have a back door that opens onto the street. That's awesome, isn't it? And then I said at the beginning I wasn't going to go through episode plot by plot point. It's kind of necessary with these ones. It's hard to avoid. They meet up with Skinner, who kind of suggests that maybe they'd be able to broker a deal, but Mulder doesn't want a deal, does he? He wants to get to the truth, but then Scully's she's desperate at this point. And she kind of says, what's the point of us knowing the truth if we're hunted down? And then she says, I just want to see my sister. She wants the ability to actually go see her sister. Mulder kind of leaves the decision to her, but she kind of bats it back because she says, I've told him to go ahead, but not turn it over unless you agree. So it's still in his court. He doesn't quite get rid of the responsibility of what to do. Halstein is still playing over Melissa. She's supposed to be getting better, but then he hears that the white buffalo calf stopped drinking his mother's milk and then the mother died after 3 days, which is very Judeo-Christian. 3 days of something. And he starts going on about, sometimes something must die for something else to live. So we kind of suggested that karma's making Melissa the sacrifice for Scully to live. That's kind of the implication. It's kind of cool. And then Skinner turns up at Melissa's bed, telling Dana he's trying to sort out things so Dana can come visit. So poor old Scully's mum just gets visitors telling her about her daughter. Then I notice that a man keeps walking past her and looking in a very pantomime way.
And a very blue suit.
Yes. Skinner goes out to kick his ass, but unfortunately there's 3 of them, including Krychek, and they beat the hell out of Skinner and take his tape. So he's got this tape. Oh, they do make the point that the sort of Captain Obvious question in this episode is, why don't they just copy the tape? And Skinner says, we tried to copy it, it's got all this protection and this, that, and that, but whatever. The fact is, if you can get out the words on it, which is what they had, you could copy it onto it. But anyway, that's TV logic. So Krychek and 2 other guys have mugged Skinner basically, but then the 2 guys want to go into a store and ask Krycek if he wants anything, and he's sitting in the car and he noticed the time blinking midday on the clock, and for some reason that means a car bomb's about to go off. Krycek runs out, car bomb blows off. He knows they're going to kill him. Mulder and Scully go back, after all this shenanigans, they go back to Klemper's greenhouse to talk to him a bit more, but he's dead. Well-manicured man is there, told him that the Nazi died of heart failure the day before. Now, you get the distinct impression well-manicured man has basically killed that fella.
Yes.
So, not bad. Doesn't matter. Eyelids, fine. And obviously, Scully was not happy talking to this Nazi. She actually, I think in their earlier conversation, he said something like, "How our research can change the world," and she said, "You certainly changed it for a lot of Jews." She's basically curling her, she's almost snarling at the man. And you can't blame her. That's fine. No one's bothered about a Nazi being killed. That's fine. He starts telling him about Roswell, so Roswell gets reeled into this one, and there was a plot to construct a big DNA resource for the likes of Klemper. Scully Mike says that's nonsense. That can't be true. It's science fiction. I think she uses that phrase because DNA. She says DNA wasn't even recognised until 1944, which isn't true because it was 1953. I just happen to know that off the top of my head. But even so, wouldn't all this be after 1953 anyway? So why is that? Anyway. So that's what it's all about, collecting DNA for Nazis. I think that's what they're kind of implying. And the well-manicured man also tells Mulder that Samantha was taken to ensure cooperation from Bill Mulder. Bill Mulder didn't like what was going on, I think. And then it's a final kicker moment where Mulder says to the well-manicured man, "Is there more?" And he just says, "More than you'll ever know," and walks off. Nice. Krycek rings Cigarette Smoking Man right in the middle of a meeting or in the middle of a syndicate and sort of tells him that if he gets a hint of him trying to be followed, he's going to blow the whistle. And CSM handles it like a trooper. Basically says, that was a call to tell me so-and-so died and the tape's been destroyed. He just tells a load of lies and gets away with it.
Yeah. Maybe to save his own skin at that point as well.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. But he seems to get away with it. Mulder, but the thing is, no one mentions Mulder still alive at this point, do they? No, even though the well-manicured man knows it, he's even talked to him. Doesn't get mentioned. It kind of gets forgotten in this episode, I think.
Yeah.
Mulder then, we have a quite interesting scene here. I thought it was really interesting. Mulder wakes up his own mother at 2 a.m. Now, the poor woman, daughter's stolen, the husband's just been shot dead. She thought her son was dead, and he wakes her up at 2 a.m. to ask her awkward questions. But he said, did Dad ever ask you to make a choice? Did he ask you which one of me and Samantha you preferred? And she says, no. And then she breaks down to, I couldn't choose, he chose, and I always hated it for him. So she was in it, kind of in on things too, in terms of she knew what happened to Samantha. It's like really shocking. This family's, talk about dysfunctional, I know.
The fact that they actually chose.
Yeah. It's grim, isn't it?
It really is.
So we get another scene with Cigarette Smoking Man and Skinner, where Skinner's talking about the tape and the cigarette. I call him CSM because that's what's in my notes. Says he can't make a deal because you don't have the tape. I know you don't have the tape. And Skinner says something like, "Well, pucker up, ready to kiss my ass," or something like that. Something very John Wayne. And he goes and gets Hosteen and tells Cigarette Smoking Man that he's memorised the contents. He's also passed it on in something like he says something like, in the ancient oral tradition of his people. He passed it on to 20 more people. Wow. So he goes, unless you kill the Navajos, we can get it all at a phone call. So, and CSM has to go off, tail between his legs, kind of thing. And we get a sad scene. Scully's standing at Melissa's bed, but it's empty. Melissa's died. She died in surgery. So it's a shame, really. That was a good character. They kind of do this, don't they? They throw away good characters now and again. And it's kind of annoying, really. There's not many left. And they sort of talking about the nature of truth. And they start talking about the files again, and Scully actually says the truth is in now. Which is a nice little Chris Carter play on words. I liked it. Yeah. But there is a good line later. They're talking about the truth, and she actually says, "I've heard the truth, Mulder. Now I want answers," which is kind of cool. Yeah. So we get a lot going on. People dying. Skinner's obviously now a good guy. Krychek's a rogue. Cigarette Smoking Man's been undermined a little. We're getting another major character in the world, Manicured Man. So, a lot going on. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I thought it was a nice kind of final episode in that trilogy. The 3-parter, and it really kind of ramped up from the second one. Yeah. With all the action questions, a few answers. It had, like you say, a bit of everything.
It was kind of exciting, wasn't it?
It was.
It wasn't until I sat and thought about it quite a bit more that I realised there was quite a lot of plot holes. That whole building is still there. They know one of the vault numbers. They also know there's other vaults that haven't been explored. That's all still there. Also, if I don't know what happened to the tape. They didn't actually clarify whether the tape was actually destroyed or not, or if Krychek's got it. I'm guessing, because he says he could blow whistles, Krychek's got the tape. Also, if Skinner was telling the truth and Albert Hosteen did memorise it, they've got that entire set of stuff that they can analyse. So I'm guessing it was a bluff. From that point of view, I'm guessing it was a bluff.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice if they'd have kind of said bluffed him, woohoo.
Imagine Skinner
subtle.
High-fiving Mulder.
So it was kind of a cool episode. I did like this arc. I like the whole arc. What would you give this one out of 10?
I would give this one an 8. Even though it had quite a few plot holes, like you say, when you really start to pick it apart, it was still very exciting. Yeah,
I still give this a 7, actually. I thought it was a little better than The Blessing Way, but they were very much of a muchness. They were a nice continuous story, and I felt the tone was maintained, even though there was a slight change of pace and stuff. It felt like a coherent sort of whole. It was a good 3-parter all round, actually. I kind of liked it, but to me it's a 7 out of 10. Okay, let's have a little break there, and with some appropriate music, and then we'll get on to the next episode, DPO.
I hate to ask, but the friend's electric. Only mine's broke down, and now I've no one to love.
Okay, DPO. It was first aired episode 3 of season 3, directed by Kim Manners. He's cropped up a few times now, hasn't he, Kim Manners? Written by Howard Gordon, aired the first time October the 6th, 1995. So these episodes are, weekly now. They're settled into a definite weekly bet. And I think this third season was where the popularity of the show really took off. They were really high ratings at this point. So that's kind of cool. This one's called DPO. It was named after the character in it, who's Darren something Oswald. DPO's his initials, because he puts it on a video game at the beginning. Apparently this was inspired by a little note on Chris Carter's board of ideas. Lightning Boy. And apparently some of the other ideas that went into this is let's do Beavis and Butthead with special powers. I've
That's
forgotten.
nice, Murray.
Yeah, I've forgotten Jack Black and Giovanni Ribisi were in this.
I know.
Some high class acting talent they've got here in this one, and they're both pretty good in this. Has to be said, they're both pretty good. That you can see why they they've got that star quality, both of them. But Giovanni Ribisi is a fairly method kind of actor, isn't he? And it is hard to watch. I find it hard to watch him sometimes without thinking of his great turn in Friends, where he's Phoebe's brother who likes melting spoons. Basically, he's white trash, isn't he? He's kind of a bit simple, maybe. And it starts with him coming back from the toilet and finding his favourite machine in a video arcade being played by someone who turns out to be like it looked like a typical, almost Stephen King kind of town bully kind of scene, didn't it? That's how it started to play out, and it's like pushing these kids around, these like nerds around, and he says, "I'll play a game," and he kind of pushes him around. But then Giovanni Ribisi gets up and says, "So is it my turn now?" And you think, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And he basically. I don't want to spend too long on this episode because I think it's a fairly lightweight episode. But he's basically Lightning Boy, isn't he? He kind of summons the lightning up and sort of can electrocute people. And he seems to have other powers that are electrically based as well, like certainly changing remotes on TVs, for example. Mulder and Scully, I can't remember why they turn up in this. Is it because of the unusualness of the pattern? Can you remember? Did I give a reason? I'm not sure they did.
I think, I'm not sure, actually.
There's, okay, well, we'll go on. So they turn up, and this bit really there's a really weird scene with this sheriff. Now, they sometimes have trouble with local sheriffs, don't they? But this guy was super aggressive. I was laughing at how much he was going, "Do you know anything about lightning?" He acted like he was the world expert on lightning. He goes, "It could turn into a ball." He's going on and on and on and on. And then there's one bit that just made me laugh out loud where he goes, "Shall I tell you why I know a lot about it? Because I have breakfast with lightning scientists from the facility down the road." And so you think, okay, so there's a lightning facility down the road. There's weird patterns in lightning. They never go there or ask anyone about it ever again. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, and look at my notes. The guy in the arcade is the latest, I think, in a series of men who've died due to lightning-related causes.
Yeah, nice. Lightning-related causes.
That's why.
And I also like, after this sheriff ran, sort of Scully goes in, looks at Mulder. He's been going on at Scully really aggressively to Scully. And Scully kind of goes to Mulder, "Jump in any time." And Mulder's like, "You were doing fine." And there's some nice little touches to this. At one point, they kind of questioning him, and they figure it out as DPO by realising the only place open when this guy died was the arcade. So they go in the arcade, then they see his initials DPO and the time on this one game, best high scores DPO
Sonic, because that did you notice that all the sound when they were in the arcade was Sonic? Everybody was playing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Everything was Sonic. I did like the fact, I don't think I've ever seen an arcade game where it actually logs the time and date of your height. Anyway, this one does. And it's all DPO, so they kind of figure out who this guy is, go and talk to him. But while they're talking to him, Mulder's mobile phone smokes and melts.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Mulder's got a Note 7.
And he's the only person to have been in, been hit by lightning and survived in the area, isn't he?
Yeah. And they figure out something about his electrolyte imbalance. He's got an electrolyte imbalance, a really weird balance of electrolytes. And I think that was from a medical that took place before he got struck by lightning. Because he seems to have a completely normal set of sort of medical readings now. I think that came out.
Yeah, so that's why he survived, because he was already kind of his body biologically was able to withstand it. Is that
something like that? I think, but it turned him into like an X-Men character or something. He's a simple soul, really, and he's quite an unlikable character. Jack Black's character is much more likable in this. Well, a bit more likable. They're both pretty terrible, actually. And at one point, something happens that I think his mother annoys him because he's burping, and his mother said, "What girl's going to marry a burping fool like you?" And he like turns the telly over deliberately. Well, it starts switching channel, and she's kind of then she realises she's sitting on the remote, so she turns it back. But then he turns it with his mind anyway, and it goes out, and he's kind of a bit peeved. And they go out into the fields, and he says to his Jack Black, "I'm in the mood for a barbecue," and he starts bringing down the lightning again, doesn't he? Including himself into himself. Anyway, he turns out he's got a crush on this teacher that was trying to teach him remedial reading, and she even failed him, and Jack Black makes fun of him for that, which he really shouldn't have done. And then he goes out and causes a car crash. Now his boss is like a garage repair guy, so he goes and gets crashes. Now he's married to this woman that he's kind of in love with, the teacher that kind of failed him. And Mulder and Scully find a picture of this woman in his yearbook, and it turns out that he told her he's got special powers. She didn't believe him because the way he is, you just think it's something he just made up, and it turns out he has. I did like the scene where Jack Black's character gets shocked because Ribisi's character thinks he kind of ratted him out or something. I kind of like that.
Now has he stolen a load of the coins as well? And they just kind of fall everywhere when he's struck by the lightning. I thought that was a nice little touch as well.
It was a good scene. It was well put together. The direction was really good in this. And then finally they kind of take him in, and he's being sort of he's in a. I don't know what to do with him really, but he's changing the channel with his mind while a song about diarrhea is playing. There's unusual use of music in this. It was kind of thrash, some of it, wasn't it, and stuff like that. I guess that was about the teenage experience or something. I don't know. It was kind of okay. I mean, the problem with it is probably Ribisi's quite unlikable. It's like, okay, they caught him. It was kind of like that to me. There were some interesting ideas, but I didn't think too much of this episode. It was okay. What do you think of it?
I think, like I say, it was a kind of welcome break after, we've had 3 quite intense, emotional, story arc episodes. So it's quite nice to just have a bit of a change in the monster of the week. But one bit that really made me laugh was when they go into his room, because I think they found a print of a shoe at one of where the lightning has struck one of these eyes, and they go try and match it with his obviously with his shoe, see if they've got the right person, and Scully goes straight into the wardrobe and Mulder goes straight for the porn magazines. That did make me laugh.
Doesn't Scully says, haven't you seen that one already or something like that? There is a reference to it. I completely forgot about it. We should definitely have a porn reference watch. Was I dreaming, or at one point when he was flicking through the channels, the X-Files came on? Or am I being mad?
I know that when he's flicking through, one of the first credits, it might be, executive producer Chris Carter comes on before everything actually goes off, and then you get to the actual credits, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, maybe. It's interesting, if you contrast this with, say, the end of Soft Light, where, we have a tragic figure being kept hidden away, and you feel really bad for him. In this one, they could have kept that guy locked up forever. I didn't care.
Yeah, and Scully Scully and Mulder have that conversation at the end where basically they say that because of the previous lightning strikes and like the sheriff, I think it was, the way he was really kind of horrible and aggressive towards Scully in particular, they can just, he's not blamed for anything. They can, it's a natural, phenomena.
Yeah. Yeah, what would you give this one out of 10?
I think it was entertaining, so I'd give it a 5.
Yeah, I think it was entertaining too. It did entertain me. It wasn't terrible or anything. And you're quite right. It was quite a welcome relief after the sort of intensity of that triple episode story we just sort of got through. I'd give it a little lower than that. I'd give it a 4. I think it's a reasonably solid one. It's just a little less than average, I think. For me, it was really interesting to see Jack Black and Giovanni Ribisi though, so it was kind of cool. Right, okay, we'll get into the last episode of these 4. Let's have a little Buddy Holly to play us in.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day. When I die, well, you give me all your loving and your loving, all your hugs and kisses and your money too. Well, you know you love me, baby. Still, you tell me maybe that someday, well, I'll be through. Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day when I die.
I was sounding a bit DJ there, wasn't I? Sorry about that. Okay, so episode 4 of season 3, Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, directed by David Nutter, the nut job. Written by Darren Morgan, his second writing credit on the X-Files, first one being Humbug. First aired October the 13th, 1995. Now, before we get going, I have to say that Darren Morgan won an Emmy for this, and Peter Boyle won an Emmy for this. So that gives you an idea of the quality of this episode. And I mentioned earlier that something in the 10th series made me think, some of the things in the 10th series made me think of some of the episodes in this series. And this one in particular came to mind when I was watching in the 10th series. There's an episode called something like Curse of the Weremont or something like that. It's kind of a comedy fun episode, and its whole vibe really reminded me of Clyde Bruckman. And I don't know for sure, but I'm almost certain that Darren Morgan wrote that Weremonster episode 2, because it just felt like that vibe. Before we get into this particular episode, is the writing and the plot are so intertwined, it's really hard to break them out. So we'll just go through them. Is that all right with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your general feel about the episode anyway?
It's a bit of a strange one. Like Humbug, you have that definite, the humour's there, the comedy. It's a bit crazy, a bit strange, a bit tonally mismatched, but it's also, like Humbug in parts, quite dark. And I personally, when I kind of knew that psychics were involved, because I couldn't quite remember everything about this episode, I really thought that Scully would be more of a kind of exploration of her trying to maybe contact her sister, or stepping outside the box and thinking more like Mulder in that respect. But she, we're 2 episodes away from her losing her sister, and it's not been mentioned yet.
Yeah, it's odd that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's let's talk about. Well, let's just start going through the plot. Actually, can I just talk about the tonality, because you're saying it's an odd one? I was listening to another podcast about this. I think it's Kumail. I can't remember. It's called I think it's X-Files Files. Not the X-Files, but the X-Files file. With Kumail, I can't remember his surname, but he was talking about this episode. And he had some really interesting background information. So I recommend going to listen to that episode, I have to say. And in fact, the whole show's pretty good, if you like the X-Files. He was saying...
Yeah,
Darren
they just
Morgan,
skip certain shows, that's a thing.
Yeah, they do. But
They don't cover everyone,
No.
but when they do, they're really in-depth.
Yeah, but what he was saying is Darren Morgan got a little depressed after Humbug, and he decided he wanted to write an episode about depression. You know, someone being depressed, or one of the protagonists being depressed. And this is really what this is. You know, Clyde Brockman is kind of depressed. And what he goes through, it's kind of some of the stages of depression, and it's kind of interesting from that point of view. I'll bring that up as they hit, if you like. But that is one to go listen to get much more details about that than we're going to talk about here. But it's definitely worth listening to. Anyway, it starts with Clyde Brockman looking through magazines that nonsense, you know, terrible tabloid magazines that inquire. Now, it's weird, you know. I thought in this episode he saw a news report about the Fluke Man, but I didn't see him read it in this. So I don't know if I've confused it with another episode, but I could have sworn he was looking through tabloids and he saw a thing about the Fluke Man, but didn't see it. So I must have it confused with another episode. Anyway, he's kind of saying, Buddy Holly's still alive. You know, there was a thing about that. And he buys a lottery ticket. One of the things I noticed about this episode, and when you think backwards and forwards in it, in pretty much everything in it ties to something else in it. It's a really well-constructed piece of writing. It kind of reminds me of the construction of the first Back to the Future film, in that every line there's no wasted lines. Everything means something, and if you watch it more than once, you know the meaning becomes more apparent. Did you feel that?
Yes, and it did feel quite complex, but I love that about it, that, you know, you really had to kind of work with it. You couldn't just, like in the previous episode, like DPO, was just kind of just sit and chill and, you know, just take it in. Yeah. This one, you really kind of have to work, and it really reminded me of a television film called, I think it's In Fear, in which a woman is psychic and helps the police to find several serial killers. Oh. Well, the premise is great, and then she comes across one killer, and that killer is psychic.
Oh, and yeah, that's exactly
it's more powerful than her. Yeah, exactly. And it's a shame because it doesn't quite work out in terms of the film. It's not executed very well, but the actual premise I thought was fantastic, and that's what I loved about this.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Pretty much everything mentioned has a reason, and basically the whole episode is kind of about: do you just submit to fate? Is it work? You know, or is your action, does it actually influence anything? It's kind of, you know, determinism versus free will at the really, really subtext level, but that's essentially what it's about, kind of thing.
And that's why I thought they might have tied it into Scully and her sister. I thought that would have been an interesting, you know, extra kind of strand to this.
Yeah. I mean, it does, bits of this do tie into the, some of the, how can we put it? Some of the some of the ongoing elements of the X-Files. We see some of them start here. Well, one of them I'm thinking of in particular. I'll talk about it when we get to it. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, he comes out, he buys a lottery ticket. He nearly bumps into this guy, and they kind of dance around each other, and the guy actually says, "You're a better dancer than my last date," and he's on the way to a fortune teller. And it turns out he's a killer. And he wants to know why he does the things he does, and he starts to kill her, and we get this kind of cool shot of as she's being murdered through the crystal ball. So the scene's upside down for a crystal ball. It's kind of cool, nice bit of direction. And then we get the crime. Say again.
It's quite grim as well. I thought
it's very grim. Because it's interesting. She does like the gypsy voice, and when he starts hurting, squeezing her hand, she goes back to like New York voice. It's kind of funny, showing she's a charlatan in effect, or, you know, or somewhat of a charlatan. And then we see a crime scene, and we immediately get a close-up of a pair of eyes and some entrails on it. And it's kind of funny. We get a bit of mystery. 2 FBI guys are going, there's a guy coming to help who's kind of unorthodox, and he's a bit spooky. And then Mulder turns up, and they say, who are you? And he says, oh, yeah. And then the stupendous Yappy turns up. This was funny. This was fun. Or was it, to me, it looked like they were basing it on Uri Geller. I don't know. Do you know who Uri Geller is?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I've got a book on him.
When you get to my age, some cultural references become non-references, so I'm not sure. But anyway, the stupendous Yappy is kind of Uri Geller. At one point, they even make a joke. One of the FBI guys says, he even bet my pen. That made me laugh. And he starts going about, there's a diary of negative energies blocking my vision. And he goes up to Scully and then switches it to Mulder, and who throws him out. And that's funny in that he says the negative, the doubter here is Mulder, not Scully. That's funny. So we know we're in Charlatan land. And Scully has a bit of a dig. Can't take you anywhere, she says. And Mulder's kind of sitting outside, kind of peeved. And then there's clapping, and the great, stupendous Yappy walks out. Do you think Mulder was a bit jealous that, he wants I get a feeling he wants to be like a rock and roll sort of awesome detective with people clap when he turns in, whereas Yappy's to get down. It's kind of funny. And Scully says to him, you missed quite a performance. And he actually then Mulder says, let me give you my psychic prediction. The murderer lives near a school or church. The letter S or number 7 is, and he goes through all these like really non-specific, vague terms, and they kind of like ignore him. And they said, "Let me get the APB out." And then the FBI says basically a load of vague stuff. But it could be it's a male between 17 and 34. He may or may not have a beard. He might have a tattoo. It's like, oh wow, that is so funny.
Yeah, and the tattoo might be of a face that has a beard. That made me laugh.
Yeah. So that's tickled me now. And then we get a scene with Brockman selling insurance, and the guy's saying, "Yeah, but I seen a nice boat," and he says something like, "But you'll find that your familial responsibilities outweigh your recreational needs." And the guy goes, "Yeah, but it's a really nice boat." So Clyde Brockman starts to tell him, how he's going to die in 2 years, he's going to be in this crash or another. And it gets really dark, doesn't it? And then the guy just says, you need to work on your closing technique. So there's a real lot of dark light in this one all the way through. And it's done really well. I can see why it won an Emmy. It's a great piece of writing. Really well polished and put together. And then we see old Brookman in his kitchen. He finds an old cabbage, and I think he sees his own face in the cabbage. I couldn't quite tell.
Yes, because that mirrors the ending.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Then he goes and sees his neighbour, this old lady, and I couldn't quite work this out. She give him a lighter.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that. And then there's this vision of the little dog eating the old lady, eating someone, which is kind of gross. What makes me laugh, he says, "Are you okay? Have you got enough dog food?" And she shuts the door. That made me laugh. And he thinks the dog's a little monster, doesn't he? A little Pomeranian thing. And then he goes down to the garbage, and there's a woman's hand sticking out. And again, a nice bit of scripting, shorthand, telegraphing. The woman's wearing like gypsy rings. Now I didn't quite work this out. This was a body of a different fortune teller, right, from the first one?
Yes. The killer's been making the rounds. Yeah.
So they sort of talk about he's taken out basically we see this killer taking out all sorts of fortune readers, don't we? Fortune tellers, I mean, like a one with doing the hands, and I think this is a tarot guy later and stuff like that.
One at the beginning read tea leaves.
Tea leaves, yeah, because Mulder has a joke about that, doesn't he? Mulder and Scully go and talk to him, but it turns out he knew stuff about the woman he shouldn't have. Like, she didn't have any eyes, but he hadn't looked at the body, and he's kind of like, well, what are you asking? You know, he says, well, was it, you know, the entrails of it, was it true? And they say, yeah. He goes, well, what are you complaining about? It's kind of, but it does make him a bit of a suspect, which they kind of mention, but don't talk about that much.
He kind of just sidesteps it, Mulder, doesn't he? He's just kind of like, yeah, you're not a suspicion. I believe that you're psychic straight away.
Yeah, that's Mulder all over, you know. Trust no one, yeah, except unless you're Mulder, trust everyone. He takes Brockman to a murder scene and he sees blood. And there's a really funny bit where he says, no, they started having sex. He goes, what is it? It was consensual, which seems weird, you know. And he says, he says it bothers me. And they said, why? He says, because everyone seems to be having sex and I'm not. And then he goes into an interesting scene that seems throwaway, but actually plugs right into the sort of whole theme of the episode, which is he's sort of going, what made her collect dolls? What incident in her life did she decide to start collecting dolls? You know, and it's kind of all this stuff. It's kind of cool, but he does get like a vision of the murder, I think, because he goes on, or the dead body, he goes and be sick. He goes and vomits, doesn't he? It's interesting that he has these visions, but he never kind of gets used to it. And again, that gets echoed. There's a later scene where Scully says, you kind of get used to dead bodies. And he says, I don't think you should ever get used to it. I don't think we're meant to get used to it, I think he says. He starts telling about the killer, doesn't he? He says he thinks of himself as a puppet, which again links to this whole thing of free will determinism. This killer feels like he's being controlled rather than he's responsible, which is kind of interesting. There's another weird, funny line. I don't know how Darren Morgan thinks of these. Is just amazing. He says, you're going to find a body by a fat little white Nazi stormtrooper. And then he says, excuse me, I've seen enough death for one night. And then when they find the body, and Mulder and Scully, they look around, there's like a gas canister that looks like a fat little white Nazi stormtrooper. And Scully's saying, yeah, that's just protection. If he'd have said anything, we'd see it somewhere. And Mulder says to Scully, what does that look like then? She says, a fat little white Nazi stormtrooper. That kind of thing. There was another thing that made me laugh, or made me think, certainly, was we see Brockman at the lottery, you know, with his lottery ticket and being really disappointed when he loses. Which, if you know anyone who does the lottery regularly, they all do that. They're all massively disappointed when they lose. It's like, but just annoys me that. Anyway, and that just tied into, is Clyde Brockman trying, you know, by doing the lottery, is he just trying to see if, I don't know, is it something that, because he can't predict, it's refreshing to him, even if he loses? Is it kind of a change from seeing all this destruction that he could foresee in people? I don't know. I couldn't work it out. I thought it was interesting though. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really.
He's still trying to figure out determinism versus free will in my mind. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but it kind of made me think about, you know, what's the lottery stuff about? I think maybe I've got too much into it. Like, it does feel like to me everything in this episode is there for a reason. You know, an echo of something earlier or later or something like that. It's kind of cool.
It is. It all kind of feeds back into itself. And in a way, it's as if, like, with the depression, he's kind of seems to be testing himself as well. And testing, you know, faith, or, you know, whether he believes in fate or determinism, whatever. It's quite interesting, quite complex. And I think this would be a really interesting one to go back and watch again quite quickly after watching it.
Yeah. One bit made me laugh. They were asked for his help, and he said, why should I help you? If I help you, I might cause this something to change. I might, you know, prompt the invention of a time machine, which causes someone to go back and cause my mother and father never to meet, and I'll never be here. Yeah, I'll help you. It goes like that. And there's another awesome bit where Mulder's, well, I thought it was awesome, but it was kind of, I think again, I might be reading too much into it, when Mulder's giving him things to try and read. He gives him this frog ornament. He goes, tell me about this. He goes, well, it's ugly. And at one point, Mulder gives him some blue material. And Brockman says something like, yeah, this is from your Nick shirt. And Mulder says, and then Mulder acts like, oh, he's just saying silly things. But if I remember rightly, in Beyond the Sea, Mulder gave Boggs a blue piece of material which was from his Nick shirt, and told him it was from a murder victim. Is that right? Did I remember that rightly?
Yeah.
But he seems utterly unimpressed that Clive Brookman knows this. And I think, is that a little inside joke there? They put that in just for the fans to sort of spot. It just made me laugh.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that this episode has kind of several similarities with Beyond the Sea.
It does, yeah, dealing with psychics. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. They seem to, the psychic episodes to me seem to be hitting a high watermark for the X-Files so far. I know. Then he gives him a key ring, and I think they mention the name of the victim, and then Brockman reels off all this information about him, and Scully's like, you know that? And he said, well, I sold him insurance 2 weeks ago. Or something like that. But he knows the guy's been murdered and where it is, so he takes him in the car, and we get this great little moment where he goes, he says to Mulder, you know, there may be worse ways to go, but it seems to me there's nothing less dignified than autoerotic asphyxiation. And Mulder goes, why are you telling me this? It goes, I forget I mentioned it. So he's basically told Mulder how he's going to go.
And it's the way that like Mulder looks at Scully, you know, as if to be like, does she believe him?
Yeah.
But that's really interesting because in this episode, everybody who comes across Brookman, you know, asks how, you know, they're going to die. Does he know how they will die? And he kind of reveals it in an offhand way to Mulder, whether you take that to be a joke or not.
Yeah.
And then we get that great kind of scene between him and Scully at the end when she asks not only how is she going to die, but how is he. I think she's the only person who asks him, I think, how he's going to go.
Right. And he says, you won't die.
Which I thought was great. He just looks and says, you know, you won't die. And that played, yeah, exactly. So
that ties into the whole mythology, doesn't it? And that's the first time we hear something about that in this little episode. It's kind of cool. So they get there and they can't find the body, but he then tells them how his powers came about, where he says, you know, he got obsessed with the fact that the Big Bopper, it was on a coin flip, he got on the plane with Buddy Holly and died, and all this causality, you know, the chain of causality, he was obsessed with it, and it kind of got him this ability. So his ability isn't a total, you know, he isn't psychic about everything. He can foresee how and when people die. Sorry, how people die, not when necessarily. So he can foresee it. They look through the woods, but they can't pinpoint it. But it turns out the car's parked on top of this body. They find a fibre on the body, and he says, haven't you got a lab to analyse this? And they kind of say, yeah, but, you know, we'd like you to look at it. And he starts to feel it, and he sees Mulder being chased, stepping on a banana cream pie, and then the killer kind of attacking him. Then he won't tell Mulder anymore. And it's interesting, we're not seeing Mulder. When you think about it, it's obvious because he's got the piece of fibre from the killer. We're seeing the killer's last moments. We're not seeing Mulder's last moments.
Yeah, but we don't necessarily know that at that point. That's really clever.
Yes, it is very clever. But it's kind of, when you think about the chain of how he works, that's how it works. They get a letter from the killer, and he asks them to tell him why he's doing what he's doing. Brockman then reveals he's going to be dead before they find him, and they decide, they put him in protective custody at that point, right? And they then have these sessions with him. He starts going on about how nice the pie is there and how he likes the doilies they're on and stuff like that, which is again a hint of the lace that you don't pick up the first time you watch it. Scully's on the first watch, which is really, I mean, I really like this section. Both Mulder's and Scully's sections of it. And he asks him what he can see. Well, I think it's here that she says, she don't die. He says, what can you see? He says, we're in bed together, and you're holding my hand after something after it happens, and tears are streaming down my face, and I'm really grateful. And neither of us will forget it. And she goes, there's hits and there's misses and there's misses kind of thing. But she likes him, he's kind of charming. There was a little interesting aside for any poker players out there. There's a point she's playing poker with Clive Brockman, and he's holding 2 black aces and 2 black eights, also a red ace. But however, 2 black aces and 2 black eights are a famous hand in poker called the dead man's hand. It was the hand held by Wild Bill Hickok when he got shot dead.
Oh, wow.
So that's where that... No one knows what the 5th card was because it was a whole card face down and he got shot and mayhem ensued. But everyone knows 2 black aces, 2 black eight. If you play poker, that's a dead man's hand. So a nice little touch. Nice little touch. Not meaningful necessarily. But then there's this discussion, again, really throwaway, but also really important. They talk about how prophecies can lead to death. A prophecy can lock you into a death, in both Macbeth and Ahab. In Moby Dick. They talk about how, I think it's Queequeg in Moby Dick. The prediction of death causes, precipitates the death. Which is interesting when you think about Scully and her father call each other Starbuck and what is it, Ishmael? I can't remember now. Starbuck, and he calls her Starbuck and she calls him... Oh, she called him Ahab. Sorry, she called him Ahab.
Yeah, she did.
Right. Yeah. Especially when you find out the little dog's called Queequeg. That's funny. So there's that kind of discussion, and then Mulder arrives. He's found the results of the lace test. It's Chantilly lace, which is interesting because he was talking about the Big Bopper earlier, which kind of is that an indication he's the murderer? I don't think they discussed that. I don't know, but to me it was like, does that mean that would indicate he's the murderer, right? Because he was talking about the Big Bopper, and now Chantilly lace has been found. Anyway, Mulder's now on watch. And he starts talking to Brockman, and Brockman tells him his dream of lying in a field of red tulips. And we get the visual of him rotting away, and he's sort of talking over it, and then he says, "And then I'll wait when it all finally goes. I'll wait for the dream." Well, good night. Kind of thing. And the next shot, we see Scully knocking the door, Mulder looking all like, and he says, "Are you okay, Mulder?" He goes, "I didn't sleep well." They bump into a bellboy who's holding a sort of doily lacy tray, and Brookman. There's a new guy there, Havez, is looking after him while Mulder and Scully are out, and he then asks Brookman how he's going to die. Is it a lung cancer? And Brookman goes, no, but Brookman knows how he's going to die. And when he goes to the bathroom, he says, "Do not open that door." And as soon as he goes in the door, there's a knock at the door, and he opens it. Again, is it free will determinism? Am I reading too much into it? I don't know. So the bellboy comes in. There's that really nice moment where both psychics recognise each other from the touch. Brockman touches the tray, and the psychic killer has got the dollar Brockman's given to him, and they both know who each other are. And he says, they brought you right to me. What are the odds on that? And then he sits down and he asks Brookman, what makes me do what I do? And he says, don't you get it? It's because you're a homicidal maniac. And the guy looks really happy that he's finally found out why he's killing people. It's like amazing. But then he kills Havez, right? He kills Havez. I'm not sure what happens here. Does Brookman just escape at that? It wasn't quite clear to me.
We don't really see how that kind of ensues unless he just leaves in the kind of struggle. Yeah.
Anyway, Mulder and Scully are, we know that Brookman does get away somehow or leaves the scene somehow while this is going on with Havez. Mulder and Scully at another murder scene with a tarot reader, and they've got everything. They've got footprints, fingerprints, everything. They find another strand. Scully gets this little flash of insight that the strand... See, I couldn't work out if the strand had stuck to her close from the tray or whether just looking at the strand... Anyway, she realised the bellboy was the murderer, and they rush back, right? And then Mulder sees the bellboy in the kitchen, runs in, sees the pie, realises what's going on. So did the prediction of his death, or, the hint at it from Brockman, make him realise where he was and how to protect himself, or did he just play out as it? Who knows? It's kind of.
I thought it was really clever though. How he said that he would kind of be behind him, and as he turned,
he was then behind him.
He was there behind it. So that was really clever, I thought.
And then Scully turns up and shoots the guy dead, and he says, "I think the guy says as he dies, that's not the way it's supposed to happen." Mulder says, "How'd you know where I was?" And she says, "I didn't. I got in the wrong elevator by mistake." Which ties into the fate, free will, determinism thing in this. It's amazing how it all fits together. Then they find a note on his door saying that his neighbour's passed away, and would she like a dog? And the dog's sitting there. And then they find Bruckman's both taken pills and put a bag over his head, and the condensation on his running down his face is like tears, right? And she's holding his hand. So, it's quite sad. It's quite sad. Yeah. Now, as I'd already mentioned, this was kind of discussed quite a bit in some detail in the X-Files Files podcast. And at one point, it made an interesting point that when depressives kill themselves, it's often when they're coming out of deep depression, because when they're in deep depression, they cannot be motivated to do it. So it's only when their mood lifts that they actually do it. And that is what Brockman's kind of doing here, perhaps.
Yeah.
What do you think motivated him to kill himself at this point?
I mean, he said slightly earlier, that's not death for one night. I think, that's a very specific gift, and it's obviously very dark and isolating anyway.
Yeah.
So, and like you say, he had that kind of moment with Scully, and he had a similar kind of conversation with Mulder, and I think he's come to a sort of to accept the way he is, and that he'll never change, but he doesn't want to live that quite kind of macabre life style anymore.
To me, it felt like he'd actually established a rapport and a contact with another human. It's almost like he was very lonely.
Yeah.
Isolated by what he was, and he'd established this rapport with Scully. So it was like Scully was like a witness who could remember him, someone who could remember him, perhaps.
Well, that's very interesting if you think of that as a parallel to Beyond the Sea, and how Scully was meant to be the witness.
Yeah.
At the end of when the sidekick dies.
They're an interesting mirror episodes, aren't they?
Yeah.
I don't think they're intentionally mirror episodes, but it's kind of an interesting sort of mirroring of what's going on there. In some ways, this bit reminded me of, or that sort of ending reminded me a bit of The Green Mile, Stephen King's The Green Mile, John Coffey, where there's a really great scene in the movie with Tom Hanks talking to John Coffey, and he says, "How can I kill one of God's greatest creations?" And he says, You'll be doing me a favour, boss. I can't stand all these bad feelings, feeling all these bad feelings anyway, because he can detect all the feelings of people around him, and when that's murderers and stuff, it's like, and he sees murder around him. It really reminded me of that scene quite a lot.
Definitely.
And the fact that Brookman said, you should never get used to death.
Yeah.
Was John Coffey.
And that he never could.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, I think a kind of resolution in that if he kind of could see his own death, and, the deaths of the victims of the serial killer, that maybe he knew he had a part to play in bringing that serial killer to justice.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, that makes sense. There was another theme in this episode was about prediction and free will and stuff like that. This is a bit quite off tangent. Maybe think of there's a theme in the book series Dune by Frank Herbert where the Paul Atreides is a prophet. He can actually see the future, but there's a theme in it that by the act of seeing the future and trying to direct himself to that future causes the calcification of that path, so he cannot get off of it. It's kind of, it had that vibe to me. I know that is a bit off topic, but it was kind of, when you start seeing things, you kind of, they draw you that way,
Yeah,
you
and
do
that's
have the
really
possibility of changing it.
Yeah, and you see that in loads of, I think, especially kind of fantasy novels. I mean, Harry Potter springs to mind and stuff like that. Once that prophecy's there, you seek it out.
We've heard it. There's a thing in voodoo, isn't it? If you tell someone they're going to die, they die. It's kind of that kind of thing. Anyway, the show, we get the sort of sad demise of Clive Brockman, his final repose, as it were. And then we see Scully watching the TV at home with little Queequeg on her lap, that horrible little monster. And the stupendous Yappy comes on, says, dial in and find out about your future and all this. And then we see Scully pick up her phone, look at the telly, and then throw the phone at the TV. It's kind of fun. So, hell of an episode.
Yes.
I think this is the longest we've talked about an episode. Maybe Fire probably beats.
We've mentioned it again. Yay.
Yeah, I've got to mention it. But in terms of sitting in one sitting, I think this is the longest we've talked about an episode. But quite rightly, I think. Let's just go to rating and then final thoughts. What would you give this out of 10?
I think it has to be a 9.
10 for me. I think this is a classic X-Files. Really liked this one. It's funny, as I was watching it, I was thinking, this isn't as good as I remember it. I remember it being a lot better than this. But as it went on, it's like, oh man, yep. It's really working for me. So yeah, 10 out of 10 for me. I really can't fault it. I'll be honest. I think all the performances, the writing, everything worked. It just worked for me.
I completely agree with you, and it's one I'd like to watch again because I think there's so much in it and it's so cleverly written. But I just think it would have been great to tie. I was really expecting that some reference to Scully's sister, because she seems absolutely fine. She's laughing, she's joking. I just thought that in terms of the wider story arc and her character, that she would have been still, grieving.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. I can't remember how this turns out, but occasionally with grief, you actually don't express it. It's a bit like PTSD. Sometimes there's a time delay.
Very true.
And then it eventually erupts, usually more violently than if you'd grieved at the time or suffered at the time because you've suppressed it. But we'll see. It might be just one of these things. They're trying to keep it episodic. So no, totally. It's just that the subject matter and the, like you say, the themes. I just thought that it was so perfect, even if it was just subtly mentioned. Yeah. I agree. And it is interesting that this really does mirror Beyond the Sea quite a lot, more ways than I thought of, actually. The more we talked about it, the more it's obvious there's a mirror in it. The only connection I'd had was the fact it was a psychic killer, and it was psychics, and that little blue piece of cloth sort of came up again. But more like as an inside joke than anything. Okay, let's wind it up there. Really good set of... Clive Brockman was by far my favourite of these, but I really enjoyed finishing off that trilogy. No really weak episodes in these 4. I mean, DPO was a little weak, but still not a bad episode. Quite entertaining. So I guess we'll be back again soon. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And remember, they're watching.